So today we are going to discuss the precautionary information about commonly used buffer. Precautionary information about a commonly used buffer. First, you should choose the buffer according to the correct pH range. What is the pH range in which you are going to maintain the pH for the addition of very small quantities of acid or a base? So first of all, you should choose that particular pH range. And you should appropriately choose the buffer which would work in that pH range. And secondly, the buffer should not have the following properties. Number one, it should not inhibit enzyme actions. It should not interfere into the enzymatic reactions which are already taking place in the biological systems. Second, the buffer should not precipitate polyvalent cations. It should never react with the polyvalent cations and precipitate the cation. And third, it should not be toxic when you are admitting the buffer into the biological systems. And number four, it should not absorb ultraviolet radiation. It should not absorb ultraviolet radiation. And fifth one, the change in temperature or change in concentration should not have effect on the pH of the solution, which means the pH has to be constant irrespective of the concentration and the temperature in which the system is maintained. So when a buffer is having all these characteristics, then that buffer is suitable to use in the biological systems. Now we are going to see some of the buffers and their important characteristics. First one is the phosphate buffer. The buffer capacity of the phosphate buffer is very high, and the pKa value of this buffer is so the phosphate buffer, it has a very high buffer capacity, and the pKa value is 7.20 at 25 degrees centigrade. pKa means the dissociation constant of the acid. See, phosphate buffer means any buffer is containing an acid or a base with its salt. That is what we have seen in the Anderson-Hasselbalch equation. And in the Anderson-Hasselbalch equation, we have seen that the pH is depending upon the concentration ratio of the weak electrolyte and the strong salt, and also the pKa value. When you take the phosphate buffer, its pKa value is 7.20. And also in this buffer, sodium and potassium salts are highly soluble. And because of this nature, this buffer is with a high ionic strength. Mu is called ionic strength. Mu is a sigma Ci(Zi) square, where Ci is the concentration of the ith ion and Zi is the charge on the ith ion. So it is a Ci(Zi) square. As the sodium and the potassium salts are highly soluble in phosphate buffer, their solutions will be having very high ionic strength. So it is impossible to prepare the phosphate buffer with a high buffering capacity and a low ionic strength. And another disadvantage of the phosphate buffer is that it easily binds with a calcium 2 plus ions and magnesium 2 plus ions. So one of the main characteristics of the buffer is that it should not combine with the polyvalent cations. But a phosphate buffer is having the tendency to combine with the calcium 2 plus and magnesium 2 plus ions. And also, phosphate buffer is toxic to mammalian cells. And also, it is not crossing the lipid bilayers. Lipid bilayers means the layer of the lipid substances. And this is not crossing that, the lipid bilayers. And also, it is lacking its buffering in the range of 7.5 to 8.0, but it is performing as a very good buffer in the range of 12.0 to 12.5. So these are all the precautionary information you should know about the phosphate buffer. Next, carbonate buffer. Now you look at this diagram. From this diagram, you can understand how the carbonate buffer is working in nature. So the rock or soil or sediments, they are all containing calcium carbonate in solid form. When the calcium carbonate in solid form is entering into the water, it becomes a calcium 2 plus and the CO3 2 minus, and the CO3 2 minus combine with water to form HCO3 minus. This is called a bicarbonate anion. Sorry, HCO3 minus, and also OH minus is coming out. And these combine with the water again to form H plus plus HCO3 minus, which becomes H2CO3, and then this H2CO3 decomposes to carbon dioxide. So this is how the carbonate equilibrium is existing in nature. And normally they are insoluble and they are very much sensitive to temperature. Why they are very much sensitive to temperature? Because the decomposition of the carbonate takes place at high temperatures. So because of this, the carbon dioxide molecule is lost at high temperatures. So when the carbon dioxide molecule itself is coming out of the system, there is an extreme pH change. pH change is very high. So the extreme pH change is observed when you raise the temperature. And because of this, it is losing its reliability on the pH. And it is able to buffer in the range 10.0 to 10.8. So that is about the carbonate buffer. Next, there is a buffer called a tris buffer. What is this tris buffer? Look here. This is actually the compound tris. Tris hydroxymethyl aminomethane. See, this is called a hydroxymethyl group or methoxy group. Hydroxymethyl group, and here is one hydroxymethyl group, and here is one hydroxymethyl group. So 3 tris hydroxymethyl, and also another amino group is attached to this carbon, and this carbon So the next buffer is a tris buffer. So this is a tris hydroxymethyl aminomethane. So when it combines with one H plus ion, you are getting this H plus ion is getting attached to this NH2 group, and there it becomes NH3 plus. So this is the salt form, and this is the base form. The pKa value of this, so the pKa value of this particular base is 8.075. So this is almost in the alkaline side. So the advantages of this tris buffer is that the pKa value is 8.075. So the buffering range is from 7.5 to 8.5. There is a vast range of its buffering capacity. And also another advantage is it is of low toxicity. And another advantage is it doesn't interfere with the biochemical reactions. And another advantage is it is very much available in the purest form. But the disadvantages of the tris buffer is the pH is temperature dependent, and also it reacts with the copper 2 plus, calcium 2 plus, nickel 2 plus, and the silver plus ions. So it is reacting with all these cations. And one more thing is this buffer is able to react even with a glass electrode. You may be knowing what is a glass electrode. A glass electrode is a system which is made up of some special type of a glass, which is a membranous, and inside this glass, hydrochloric acid of a 0.1 normal strength is kept, and also it is coupled with silver chloride electrode to find out the pH. Normally it is also called the pH meter or pH electrode. That glass is corroded by this tris buffer. So this tris buffer is able to react even with the glass electrode. So these are all the advantages and the disadvantages, and as a whole, these are all the precautionary information you should know about the tris buffer. And the next buffer we are going to discuss is EDTA buffer. And before that, you should understand what is EDTA. It is ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid. Look at this molecular formula. This is ethylene. Actually, a double bond might have been there for ethylene. From the ethylene, one side an amine, and the other side another amine is connected. And then the nitrogen has 2 more bonds. And in the 2 bonds, an acetic acid molecule is connected. And here also an acetic acid molecule is connected. And even there also an acetic acid. And here is also an acetic acid molecule is connected. But here it is H, H, here it is O minus, O minus. Okay. So there are 4 acetic acid molecules and also an ethylene and also a diamine. So this is called ethylene, diamine, and then tetraacetic acid molecules. And this EDTA is able to act as the chelating agent. Chelating means it is something like a handle, or that will lock the divalent cations inside, something like a cage. Chelating, it is something like a locking, a handle like. It is a good chelating agent for divalent cations. And also, because of this chelating effect, it is added to the systems where the reduction of divalent cations is desired. So it is used to reduce the concentration of divalent cations. And also, as it is having a tendency to chelate with divalent cations, it is always finding its application in the works associated with nucleic acids, because when you are working with the nucleic acids, there is a lot of possibility for you to interact the magnesium 2 plus ions, because the magnesium 2 plus ions are the cofactor for many enzymes. So while you are working with magnesium 2 plus ions, EDTA will be able to easily chelate with the magnesium 2 plus ions, and it will reduce the concentration of that divalent cation. Hence, the scientists who are working with the nucleic acids are using EDTA buffer for the reduction of the concentration of divalent ions. But this shows absorption of ultraviolet radiation. And also, you cannot use this EDTA buffer at high concentrations. The optimum concentration with which anybody can comfortably work is of the order of 0.001 molarity. So these are all the precautionary informations about EDTA buffer. And then there are other buffers called boric acid buffer and the glycine buffer. Actually, these two buffers are to be discussed separately, but as they have some common characteristics, chemical characteristics, I have put them in a tabular column. So the boric acid and the glycine buffers. Boric acid buffer is with least toxicity, and the glycine buffer is also with the least toxicity. And both the buffers show UV absorption, but they differ in the buffering range. Boric acid buffer is able to buffer between the range 8.7 to 9.7, and the glycine buffer is able to buffer between the range 9.5 to 10.3. And the boric acid buffer is normally used in the bacteriophages. Now here you can see their equilibrium or their dissociation, which are applied in the Anderson-Hasselbalch equation. Look here, this is boric acid molecule. So in the water medium, in the presence of OH, it forms another OH connected to the boron atom and becomes a borate ion. And once the OH minus leaves, it becomes boric acid. It is this equilibrium that maintains the pH of the boric acid buffer. But here, glycine buffer, it is able to maintain pH in a wider range. It is because it is able to maintain pH in two different stages or in two different pKa values. This is pKa 1, this is pKa 2. You can use these two as buffer or these two as buffer. Here, the amine group is ionized, whereas acid group remains unionized. This is the Zwitter ion. Both the amine group and the carboxylic group. Now you see, so this is called the Zwitter ion. Zwitter ion means both amino group and the carboxylic group getting ionized. And here, the amine group is not ionized, whereas the carboxylic acid group is ionized. So this can maintain two different pKa values. And the buffering is also found in two different pKa values. And according to Anderson's equation, this can be treated as the unionized molecule, and this can be treated as the ionized molecule. And in the next range, this can be treated as the unionized molecule, and this can be treated as the ionized molecule. So by changing the ratio of these two ions and this Zwitter ion in taking it in common, you can maintain the pH at two different pKa values. And these are all the important information about the glycine buffer. The next buffer is glycine buffer. What is this glycine buffer? So this is called a glycine buffer. Look at this structure. Actually, this is C double bond O, CH2, NH2, and then NH, CH2, C double bond O, OH. Normally, this buffer is used in the enzymological works, and also the buffering capacity is in the range 7.5 to 8.0. And this shows very low UV absorption. And also the enzyme active assays in the UV range will not be impeded because the buffer itself is showing UV absorption. And also this glycine buffer is not having affinity for the divalent ions like calcium 2 plus and magnesium 2 plus. And it is a peptide. What is a peptide? Peptide means two amino acids are connected together by a bond called peptide linkage. The peptide, polypeptide linkage, it causes the protein. When the protein is fragmented, when the protein is broken down, it becomes amino acids. So it is a peptide. Glycine is a combination of the two amino acids, and they are linked together by a peptide linkage. So the peptide linkage is susceptible for cleavage by the enzyme called protease. So it cannot be used in the presence of protease because the protease enzyme is able to cleave the peptide linkage, and it is able to break the glycine into two different fragments and two different amino acids. And these are all the important points about the glycine buffer. And the other buffer is triethanolamine buffer. Look here, this is the triethanol amine. This is an amine with three ethanolic groups. And here is an ethanolic group, and here is an ethanolic group, and here is an ethanolic group. And all these three ethanolic groups are connected to one nitrogen atom, and that nitrogen is connected to another hydrogen. Hence, here the nitrogen gets 4 connections, so it gains a positive charge. So this is used in the enzymological works. But the important feature about this triethanolamine buffer is that it has the advantages of glycine buffer, and it does not have the disadvantages of glycine buffer. Advantages means it is a very low UV absorption, and it does not have affinity towards the cations. And the disadvantage is, the disadvantage of glycine buffer is it is easily cleaved by the enzymes. But here, trimethanolamine buffer is not easily cleaved by the enzymes. And another thing is a good buffer. What is a good buffer? Good buffer, actually, it is not speaking about the quality, good or bad. The buffer is defined by a scientist called Norman Good. And because of that, the buffer is named after him. It is a good buffer. The good buffer is a zwitterionic buffer, and it is non-toxic, and it does not absorb UV radiation, and it does not precipitate divalent cations, and it does not have temperature sensitivity. If these properties are found, it is a good buffer. And this is another very important and very interesting thing, how these buffers are used, or how these buffers are finding their role in the biological systems. I think only 5 minutes or more. I will end the meeting. Please rejoin so that we can discuss things for some more time. See, in our body, the pH is maintained at various places. The pH is not the same all over the body. Our stomach is highly acidic, our intestine is alkaline, our mouth is alkaline. Like this, the pH changes from place to place. If the pH is coming down, if the pH decreases, then it is called acidosis. If the pH increases, then it is called alkalosis. What happens when pH comes down? That means it is coming down in a particular place from its usual value. Here, the pH goes up in a particular place than its usual value. So when the pH comes down, it is acidosis. It stimulates the brain and the arterial receptors. And then what happens? The respiration rate increases. So when the respiration rate increases, the carbon dioxide level in the blood comes down, and the bicarbonate or the H2CO3 in the blood comes down. So the pH increases. This is how the pH is maintained when the pH is coming down. In the case of alkalosis, again the brain senses and the arterial receptors are working, and then the respiration rate decreases, and then the carbon dioxide level in the blood increases, and then H2CO3 in the blood increases, hence the pH comes down. So the acid-base homeostasis is restored. So here the homeostasis is disturbed, here it is restored. So it all depends upon the H2CO3 and the CO2 equilibrium in our body. So that is what is clearly explained here also. See, carbon dioxide aqueous combines with water to give H2CO3, and then it is getting dissociated into H plus and bicarbonate ion in the blood. So what happens? CO2 from the lungs, it is causing this equilibrium, and this HCO3 minus, while it is eliminated through the kidneys, it affects this equilibrium, but the entire system has to be in a perfect equilibrium to maintain the pH at various conditions. So this is what is happening in the lungs. See, HCO3 minus from the blood vessel, it goes to the blood, whereas the H plus, it goes here, and again it combines with the HCO3 minus. This is proximal tube. This is the proximal tube coat. This is the bloodstream. So there is always an exchange of HCO3 minus and the H plus between the bloodstream and the lungs surface and the kidney elimination. Everything is taking place. And whenever there is a change in the pH in any part of the body, immediately the restoration process takes place according to the flow chart given. I suppose you understand all things what we have discussed so far. If at all any doubt you have, you can ask me, and